And as results from the program, the general theme or leitmotif, if you want, of this year conference is the critical discussion of major current trends of regulation and supervision of the financial sector, with four main strands of discussion within this general topic, which include namely, one, the building blocks of the European Banking Union and the first steps of the Banking Single Supervisory Mechanism, SSM, covering the developments in progress in the wake of the effective establishment of the SSM and its first months of activity. Two, the safeguard of financial stability and the main challenges ahead in this domain, comprehending ways of assessing and duly monitoring and supervising systemic risk with the insight that has resulted from the recent worldwide financial crisis. Three, the launching of the new European project of the so-called European Capital Markets Union. And four, the transition to Solvency II in the field of insurance supervision, also discussing relevant issues of financial stability related with the insurance sector, which must also receive attention. Ora, muito bom dia a todos. Nós vamos tentar ser rigorosos no tempo. De resto, o primeiro orador no primeiro painel, o professor Viral Achária, tem um voo para apanhar, portanto vamos ser bastante estritos na gestão do tempo. As nossas boas-vindas a mais uma conferência anual do CIRSF, Centro de Investigação em Regulação e Supervisão do Setor Financeiro, e da Cátedra Jean Monnet em Regulação na Universidade de Lisboa, que está ligada a este centro, em cooperação com o Banco de Portugal e com a Autoridade de Supervisão de Seguros e de Fundos de Pensões. Eu vou começar em português, nestas breves palavras de abertura, enfim, tendo em conta a tradução simultânea, mas vou passar rapidamente para o inglês, em atenção à maior parte dos oradores internacionais nesta conferência e também, como académico, a liberdade dos académicos, não tendo outras condicionantes institucionais para ter que falar em português. E, de resto, passar ao inglês tem também a vantagem da brevidade, com este constrangimento da necessidade de saída do professor Viral Achária, que tem um voo de ligação para a China e terá que sair, portanto serei muito breve. Permitam-me só que refira ainda em português o prazer que representa a presença de todos aqui nesta conferência internacional, com o apoio fundamental e a parceria científica de instituições de supervisão financeira nacionais, com especial vocação prudencial, o Banco de Portugal e a Autoridade de Seguros e de Fundos de Pensões, que muito agradeço na pessoa do professor José Almassa, aqui presente e intervindo na abertura desta conferência, e que farei questão de agradecer depois também esta tarde, na pessoa do professor Pedro Duarte Neves, atendendo a que quer ele, quer o Sr. Governador Dr. Carlos Costa estão condicionados hoje com um encontro de bancos centrais de Paulo Lopes no Banco de Portugal. Enfim, foi uma coincidência temporal que não pudemos evitar, porque normalmente esta nossa conferência é marcada quase com um ano de antecedência. So, skipping now to English and trying to be brief, it is indeed a great pleasure to host again this CIRSF International Conference with a group, I would dare say, of outstanding speakers that we have been able to join here today. And as results from the program, the general theme or leitmotif, if you want, of this year conference is the critical discussion of major current trends of regulation and supervision of the financial sector, with four main strands of discussion within this general topic, which include namely, one, the building blocks of the European when addressing in general the main challenges to the stability of the financial sector as a whole. Intentionally and within the
still keep functioning the bank as normal, or for investors to say, oh, the market value of the bank is going to zero, but it has so much book equity, so let me keep lending to this bank. It just doesn't work. Now, you may quibble that market equity is not perfect, markets may sometimes overreact to bad news, etc., etc. But I think that problem it's not relevant, because if the market value of a bank is going to zero, in my opinion, effectively that bank is going to fail, and then we are going to either have to resort to a quick resolution, which if there is a correlated shock, a tsunami kind of shock, is not easy to resolve because there's no capital in the system. And therefore, either we are going to have to use the central bank balance sheet, or we are going to have to use the taxpayer money in order to fix this bank. And so this question of whether market value of a bank is right or not is in some sense moot to me, because when the market value of a bank or a financial firm goes to zero, it can't keep functioning normally. And that's good enough for me as a sign of stress in the banking sector, or at least as something that I want the bank to privately guard it.
The choices that the Commission and more generally the European Union will have to make about what will be the substance of this capital markets union. And here there are a number of trade-offs. And when you think about it, perhaps the most important is that this is a long-term policy. And there is a temptation to stimulate, short-term macroeconomic impact, but the truth is that financial ecosystems change slowly, except when there is a major crisis. The adjustment is very gradual, and what we're talking about here is no exception. So there is a temptation, politically motivated, to rush for results. And I think we very much have that for securitization, frankly. Maybe we'll come back to this in the Q&A. I don't want to be too long here, but the truth is this is structural reform. It's long-term, so there will be this trade-off. Then there is a question of financial regulation strictly defined or something broader. And of course, for Commissioner Hill, well, he has his turf, and that's financial regulation. But if you think of it from the Commission perspective, you could have things like insolvency, taxation, etc. I'll come back to them, which are not strictly speaking under the turf authority of Commissioner Hill. And that's a difficult trade.
Supervision of banking groups from a holding downwards. And then consequences of regulation of the banking sector. There are many more already said, many more that I cannot touch. One perhaps to mention here is that of regulatory and supervisory capture, which is also already addressed in the SSM regulation. This is my ABOR Bible, and here it is. The SSM regulation, recital 75 to the preamble, says that the ECB should be free from industry interference. So the issue of supervisory capture is already acknowledged there, but I will not go into that here. Let me first go to the first of those intersection issues, integrity and ethical banking, the banking culture issue. Certainly something that is very much in the forefront of media attention. You hear an awful lot of banking bonuses, banking practices, banking standards, banks being berated for their behavior in the past. I see posters here about being austere, about being really strict with persons, and then I think they mean banking persons predominantly. Actually, there is a kind of competence for the ECB, because the ECB has to assess the suitability of shareholders and the fit and proper nature of managers and directors. But on the other hand, integrity of the banking sector or of individual banks is considered, at least by some, my own member state national authority, the Dutch Central Bank, as their own fiefdom, their own prerogative. And I consider that something of an intersection issue that the ECB should tackle head on, because there is a need for the ECB to formulate its own opinions on what is an ethical and proper banking culture, and to imbue the banking sector with its perspective on proper conduct. Second issue here, let me see where that is. It's over here. It's AML CTF, everything having to do, again, it's close to what I said before, with an ethical and a proper banking culture, money laundering, terrorist financing. It's clear that that is not an SSM prerogative. It says so in the preamble to the SSM regulation, but it's also quite clear that a joint approach is called for, because this is something that the ECB simply cannot leave only to the conduct supervisors or to the national supervisors.
Aspectos fundamentais do seguro que naturalmente levam a que os riscos sejam absorvidos ou impactem de forma diferente no modelo no balanço das seguradoras. Portanto, desde logo estamos a falar, no caso do modelo de negócio segurador tradicional, e eu já vou explicar daqui a pouco o que é que significa este tradicional, estamos a falar de agregação de riscos tendencialmente não correlacionados com os mercados e tendencialmente não correlacionados com o ciclo económico. E, portanto, o que significa que numa situação de stress dos mercados financeiros, há um impacto que pode ser substancial no ativo da seguradora, mas, por outro lado, o passivo permanece controlado. A menos que estejamos a falar de uma situação em que há um choque dos mercados financeiros e, ao mesmo tempo, há uma série de catástrofes naturais, ou uma coisa do género. Quer dizer, mas vamos esperar que isso não aconteça, porque, de facto, esse sim, mas isso seria impossível, de facto, suportar. Mas, como estamos a falar de riscos não correlacionados, à partida, há este efeito de mitigante, portanto, de não correlação entre o negócio segurador e os mercados financeiros. A própria gestão, em caso de ocorrência de situações de stress dos mercados financeiros ou das responsabilidades de seguros, permite maior flexibilidade. Ou seja, o problema existe, o balanço pode estar, portanto, o balanço de uma seguradora pode estar completamente sob stress, mas há a possibilidade, uma vez que as responsabilidades de seguro são pagas de uma forma faseada e portanto, são libertadas, os cash flows são libertados de uma forma mais progressiva, há a possibilidade de gerir, de trabalhar planos de recuperação numa lógica de médio e longo prazo e, portanto, de assegurar que a seguradora continue a prestar os seus serviços sem disrupção. Eu vou passar aqui vou passar diretamente para este slide para salientar aquilo que é os dois aspectos fundamentais que a IAIS identificou como importantes para efeitos sistémicos do setor segurador, que é as chamadas atividades seguradoras não tradicionais ou não seguradoras, com a sigla NTNI, portanto Non-Traditional Non-Insurance, e também da interconexão entre as seguradoras e outras entidades financeiras, nomeadamente bancos. Portanto, estes dois aspectos foram considerados pela IAIS como os fundamentais para determinar o risco sistémico de uma empresa de seguros. Ora bem, as atividades non-traditional, non-insurance, são atividades...
A concern which is on this potential perceived trade-off between, financial stability, safeguarding financial stability, safety and soundness of institutions on the one hand, and promoting growth and jobs on the other hand. I mean, it was discussed this morning. I think Nicolas made the point already that there has been this shift in emphasis in the policy debate at the European level, no? And in a sense, this has gone together with a sort of narrative that could sound a bit like that. So far, we took care of stability, maybe a bit too much, but from now on, let's say the priority is growth and jobs, so we need to shift to that. This type of line of subtle argumentation, let's say, concerns me in two respects. First of all, because I think that what we have done so far is not, let's say, promoting stability by itself, but is restoring the conditions for the financial institutions, and especially the banking sector, to support growth and jobs. So I think that, let's say, there is a mistaken representation, in my view, of the first phase of the reform project. And second, and always in this respect, we must also not lose focus on the finalization of the reform package, because we still have some important components of the regulatory reforms which are in the pipeline. I'm talking about the net stable funding ratio, the leverage ratio, and from what concerns in particular the work that we have done at the EBA, the massive effort we are putting in place in order to repair the regulatory treatment of internal models and risk-weighted assets, the consistency and reliability of risk-weighted assets. So this is the first point. The second element of concern is that I don't think that when you think about moving financial policy and especially financial regulation towards supporting growth and jobs, I mean, there could be, and sometimes I perceive that there is in some audiences, the perception that we need to water down the regulation in order to support growth, and that we should give less care towards the financial stability concerns. And I think that that's also, in my view, not the right perspective, especially if we develop the project of the Capital Market Union. We should also be very much alert to the type of risks that can build up when you develop non-bank financing, when you develop capital market financing, and the changes in the channels also for contagion that can
and move to the current situation. I mean, most of the macroprudential approach was actually having in mind the beginning of the current financial crisis. And I would say that macroprudential is more challenging when indebtedness levels are already at high levels or very high levels, and growth is very small. And when I speak about low growth, I mean both real and nominal growth. And once again, nominal growth is important to erode indebtedness. So, I mean, why is it so challenging to conduct macroprudential policy today? And here I mention a couple of reasons. For instance, countercyclical macroprudential policy is constrained right now, given that capital buffers were not built during good times when indebtedness levels were much lower. Second, I mean, indebtedness levels are high in the private sector. I mentioned that already. Public indebtedness is extremely high in many countries. And in many cases, exposure to the domestic sovereign by the banking sector, by the local banking sector, increased considerably since the beginning of the crisis. And as well, profitability of the banking sector is clearly under strong pressure, and the business models of most of the banks will have to adapt to the new circumstances. And in particular, profitability is extremely difficult to restore by increasing volumes or quantities or credit. And in addition, it is not totally clear how private savings could behave or will behave in a situation characterized by very low, if not nil, nominal and real interest rates, in a context in which already saving levels are in some countries at very low levels by any historical comparison, and at least with the periods prior to the crisis. And finally, a context of very low interest rates and large-scale liquidity injections may, or may not, but may feed asset price bubbles, say in housing and real estate, for instance, and magnify the potential for existing externalities in the financial sector. So
the work is in the so-called SREP process, supervisory review and evaluation process, which basically combines all the assessments regarding the risk of a bank and the activities of a bank regarding governance, capital requirements, cyber risks, operational risk, legal risks. All this is then combined into a decision on the capital requirements that the bank should fulfill. We have the decisions regarding authorizations that the ECB has to authorize any bank in Europe, in the euro area. So any bank that, or anyone that wants to create a bank and license a bank has to request that from the ECB. We also have the exclusive competence to withdraw the license of any bank, significant or less significant, is ECB that has to withdraw the license. The same for qualifying holdings. So any qualifying holdings in banks in the euro area have to be authorized by the ECB, and also for fit and proper. And this is why we end up with thousands of decisions every year that we will need to do. We have prepared a supervisory manual that we have summarized in a guide that is now a website. But I hope right now supervisory manual is hundreds and going to thousands of pages, and I hope one day that it will be published. But at this stage is being elaborated and methodologies are being developed. And one of, let's say, the highlights for 2015 is that we are indeed working on the SREP methodology, so the first single methodology to review the risk of the banks. We also have the administrative border review, which is also something that is very innovative in European law. So it's also the first time that there is a panel that can basically make recommendations to review European decisions. And it has been now very active with several appeals. We also have the on-site inspections, which is also another area of our work, that we have teams, multinational teams, and we make an effort that, for example, the leader of the team is not of the same nationality as the bank and the country they are visiting, so again, to ensure neutrality. And we have a wide range of training activities to make sure that the thousands of colleagues in the national authorities and the ECB all develop the same, let's say, supervisory culture. To conclude, right now you can see that we are now trying to set out what are our priorities now in the next few months and maybe years. So I mentioned the single SREP process. Another priority is the quality of capital and liquidity. Following the crisis, and as we discussed already today quite a lot, I mean, the fact that we have low economic growth, low interest rates, unemployment means that, for example, the level of non-performing exposures is growing, so there's an increase.
Let me just conclude. I think I've been talking long enough now. Shadow banking is used to describe these two very different systems. When people talk about China's shadow banking and talk about Western-style shadow banking, really they're talking about two systems which are, in their basic fundamentals, quite different. And I think it's, in some ways, it's misleading to use the same term to describe both of them. They do have a number of common features. It includes things like a lack of transparency, a lack of regulation, and a lack of official sector backstop, such as lender of last resort. But then there are also very important differences. The capital markets play a major role in Western-style shadow banking systems. In China, what we have essentially are a number of non-bank financial intermediaries. Things which, if we sort of use the duck analogy, yes, they walk like a duck and they quack like a duck, but they're not actually authorized as a duck. We've got a difference between the arbitrage of prudential regulation, which is one of the factors that has driven the growth of Western-style shadow banking, whereas in China it's more about arbitraging around credit controls. And so I think you can make the argument, in a sense, that the growth of shadow banking in China has been a kind of de facto financial liberalization, where the authorities haven't been able to get rid of some of these capital controls, credit controls for various reasons. Allowing the growth of a shadow banking sector allows the introduction of some kind of market-based pricing of credit. And so you can see it as a kind of liberalization of the system. Western shadow banks distribute risks across a broad base of investors, whereas in the Chinese case, many of the investors in shadow bank products are households. They're people who otherwise would hold bank deposits. And that creates a different type of risk, and it creates particularly the risk of a run on some of these shadow financial products. So to conclude, what I'd say is that if you look at what really is happening with China's shadow banks, they look like the non-bank financial intermediaries that we're familiar with from many countries around the world. They were a problem in Asia in 1997-98. The finance companies in Thailand, the so-called merchant banks in Korea, were non-bank financial intermediaries, and they played a role in generating the financial crises in those countries. Coming back to Europe in the early 1990s, there were the finance companies in Sweden, which were a major part of the banking crisis in Sweden in the 1990s. But why do we think that, despite these parallels, the shadow banks in China don't pose the same kind of level of systemic risk? The simple answer is, as I said at the outset, the shadow banking system in China is small compared to the formal banking system, and it also, at the end of the day, enjoys or the borrowers from that system will enjoy a degree of state support, because in a very highly state-controlled economy like China's, the authorities are very reluctant to see.
And to some extent, the SSM area has become the home country for credit institution, which means, of course, the ECB has the power of licensing financial institutions. There is also a trend to keep a level playing field between significant and less significant banks, and this will be a challenge, and we will see in a moment why. And of course, the ECB will have to try to some extent to contain the proliferation of level 2 legislation, which will have to come now with when the system is going to be in place. Of course, one of the issue that comes up also in other discussions when we talk about capital markets union is the convergence of supervisory practices. And the report also suggests the introduction of a scorecard that could actually help the peer-to-peer review of supervisory practices. Of course, there is an urgent action that is needed essentially on financial reporting standards, which still remain not fully aligned. Of course, there is the discussion of how the SSM will interact with other pillars of the banking union, and especially the resolution mechanism. And in particular, when actually the SSM or the ECB, we understand, it's not clear which part of the ECB will decide on the viability of the banks. I assume it will be the SSM that will potentially trigger the resolution mechanism. And it's important that we discussed also this yesterday night, that it's a rule-based approach, because the risk is there, of course, that you may end up in contracts between the objective of the supervisor and the monetary policy function. So if you want to be sure that the market doesn't go into an environment of high volatility, to make sure that the system is rule-based. Of course, there is also an element, an institutional element, but I'll take just a moment. I will get back to this, especially on the part of what has been mentioned before by Pedro concerning the national
spirit.
Defaults.
Of